Go for it.
Okay. Hi, Bridge, and thank you for doing this again. Following up on our last meeting, I thought I'd flesh out a little bit about my early years. I remember at a very young age, Dad was in the hospital. He had been put in for acute bronchitis, and I got to where I thought he needed something, and so I grabbed my blanket and or something to take to him. And I walked from my house and I went up Santa Maria Street, and I guess I went about a mile and a half and got picked up by a neighbor who wondered what I was doing out there by myself. And I didn't get to go see Dad because at my age they wouldn't let me on the floors. They restricted people under 12 from visiting patients. Uh, but it was a unique experience. I didn't get in trouble. They liked the fact that I did that for my dad. I remember grandmother's Christmases when we go to midnight mass, and then we go over to grandmother Lindecker's house, and Dad would drop us off, and he'd have something he had to do, and of course, what he was doing was assembling all the toys at our house. In the meantime, we would have sweet tamales, and we'd play the player piano. You'd pump the pedals, and it would play all these rolls of music. So we had a great time with all the cousins and ran around the house and had a good old time. And of course, we were extremely tired by then and wondered why we couldn't go home. And of course, Dad, in the meantime, was having a hard time putting all these things together. And but he'd come pick us up, and we'd go on the front door to find out that Santa Claus had visited us while we were at Grandma's house. And so that was a really a unique time. I remember because I had to repeat first grade because of my asthma, and they sent me to Ursuline instead of St. Peter's. And when I went into the Ursuline, first and second grades were in their own, or kindergarten and first grade were on their own building. So when I walked in not knowing which one to go to, and I went into the kindergarten, was just having a great time playing with all the toys until somebody realized that I needed to be in the other grade. So I had to go in where they were studying. It was a traumatic experience, but I remember when Aunt Loney and Aunt Tilly, who were Mater's two sisters, Aunt Loney would love to kiss the boys and girls, and of course we hated that. And she was a little overweight and very loud. Aunt Tilly was this sweet thing who always brought us sweet taffy from Joski's because she worked there, and she was our favorite. And we had a pool in our backyard, fairly small and very shallow, but it had a slide, and there were all the neighborhood kids would come, and we'd all have a great time during the summer swimming there. I remember the years that I worked for Uncle Fred Winch at the City Drug Company, and he had a station wagon with a governor that limited you, where it would cut out after you push the gas pedal too far, it would stop. So you'd have to wait until it restarted and then go again. So the challenge was, how could you get it on hills to go faster, to get right at the edge of the governor cutting in and get it to go fast. So that was the fun part about it. I remember Uncle Willis, Mom's youngest brother, who was just a card. He always had jokes. He was a little short and fat guy. He and Aunt Billy were just really, really nice to me. They gave me a graduation party at high school, and Aunt Billy made me a beautiful album, and they threw a dance and had a band and everything for me, and invited all my friends. And I remember Dad going off with, I think it was Billy Weeks and Marcus Semmelman, and used to go out to the airport, and they'd have a small plane that they would learn to fly in. And I got the stories about Dad when he was younger, and he had a motorcycle. And to impress Mother, he used to go in front of Grandfather Leindecker's house and do circles on his motorcycle until Mom came out, and then the parents would run him away. And I heard the story about there was a bridge washout south of town and had one plank left, and he managed to ride his motorcycle over that one plank over the entire length of the bridge. So he was quite a hero with the motorcycle crowd. My cousins were the Lajardos, Augie and Tommy, and of course Tanny was their younger sister. And the Fariases, Hector was in my class, and two twins below that. And Uncle Sonny's kids were older than we were. Freddie and David were the oldest, and then Louise and on down were more my age. I remember Uncle Claude worked at the smelter, and we'd go out there in the car with Dad, and they had a little railroad that would take the slag, and it would be melting, so it'd be red, and they would take it out to one of the hills that the track ran, and they would dump the cars over the side. So it was like looking at a volcano with lava. So it was a lot of fun to be there. Remember going to the drive-in and watching the cliffhangers where, oh no, the hero was going to get killed and hanging from a cliff or something. And of course, then it would cut off, and we'll see you next week for the next installment. So that was a fun time to be out there. Laredo in the summer, it was a little cooler in the evening, like most deserts. So that drive-in movies were a good place to be. I remember working for Uncle Willis. He owned the Gateway Lumber Company, where grandfather and then his sons, Edward and Peter, were the ones that ran the City Lumber Company. And the great flood of Laredo that wiped out the bridge, at the time the flood happened, Uncle Willis came and picked me up, and we went over to see his lumber yard. We got, I guess, about a block and a half away, and you could see the lumber company and he asked me if I could, go down there to see what had happened. So I went into the floodwaters, which now I know was the dumb thing to do, particularly with all my asthma and so forth. But I didn't. It was all, my lower extremities, and went to the front door and opened the door and saw that all the labels had come off the paint cans because it loosened the glue, and that basically the interior was totally, had been totally immersed. And of course, all the lumber in the bins had been underwater as well. So I came back and reported to me, and he was very happy that I had done that for him. I remember riding to school. The Jordans lived a block away, and they went to St. Joseph's. Johnny was in my class, and Carolyn was, I think, a year either older or younger. But we'd ride to school together. Remember, Francis went to Ursuline in Laredo. Of course, so did I for 2 years. And I took piano my first 2 years, and they were very, the ruler method of education, of you couldn't let your hands drop or you'd get smacked with a ruler on your knuckles. needless to say, when they had a recital and all my friends were there because their sisters and so forth were in the recital, and I'm the only guy. Of course, in a old boys' school, you can imagine the kind of ribbing you take. Well, that ended my piano career. Uh, let's see. I remember learning to walk fast and walk to school sometimes and walk back if there wasn't a ride, and got to where I enjoyed it. Could walk pretty rapidly. I know that enjoyed going to the roller rink, and you would have speed contests, which most cases I would be one of the winners. And one time I was there with a bunch of friends, and they said, well, we're going to go out riding. So we went out riding and wound up near uh, a park over near where the Guajardos live. And a bunch of strangers, almost like a gang, kind of surrounded us and started John, uh, were doing relaje, which is teasing each other. And then this guy pulls a knife, and the good advantage I had was my speed, so I was out of danger pretty rapidly. And uh, I took people with me as I left. I remember doing when I had the Jeep going in that same area, and which was a dirt road, hitting the brakes and turning the wheel and doing a 360. Why we didn't flip the Jeep, I'll never know, but we apparently were willing to live on the edge and do that. The Jeep was also helpful. We'd be out chasing rabbits in the Jeep in the fields, and then what they would have me do is somebody would drive the Jeep and I'd chase the rabbits on foot. And needless to say, I never caught one, but it was fun trying. Remember going to the Coca-Cola plant to visit Dad, and remember then working there in the summers and delivering Cokes uh, and learning how to pick up a case of Coke with one hand and learning how to take a keg of beer off a truck and drop it onto a kind of a pad and then roll it into the to the bar where we were delivering it. I remember a trip to Brownsville in the bus where we played St. Joseph's of Brownsville when I was, I guess, I think it was a junior, and I managed to catch 2 passes for touchdowns, and I was the hero of the game. And as we rode back, again, an unair conditioned bus, and with everybody not taking showers, you just go in your pads on the bus. But I learned we had a guy from France who was visiting somebody and was his classmate at the time, and so he and I were trying to learn. I was trying to learn some expressions in French from him as we drove back. But it was an interesting trip, and I kept imagining the headlines in the paper and how I would be a hero. Needless to say, my expectations were not met. Uh, the I remember also going to a track meet in Corpus Christi. It was the Bishop's Relay or something like that. All the Catholic schools in the state, and tons and tons of kids. And you'd drive up in the bus, and everybody would be out there. The bus would leave you off, and so you'd spend the whole day running races. There was no shade. You were in a stadium, and you're right on the coast. So I remember the first year I went, I was extremely sunburned coming home in the bus. I was beet red, and you could put a finger on your arm and leave a print. I do remember we were having our track meet for all the schools, the Marriott schools, And we went to mass in the morning at Guadalupe, which was just down the street from St. Joseph's. And as I'm hanging out in front, one of the people from St. Joseph's, Brownsville, was saying, "We've heard about this real fast runner you have in from St. Joe's, some guy Notzon or something like that." And I said, "Yeah, I know of him." And they said, "Well, we have a really fast runner, and but he's a little worried because he's heard that Notzon has faster times." And I said, "Well, no, he's a good runner." And of course, then when we got to the stadium and I won the track meet, uh, obviously they knew they shouldn't have talked to me, but it gives you an edge when you're a runner, when you know other runners are worried about you. Otherwise, when you start worrying about others, it limits your ability. Uh, it was I remember one of the things in track, my senior year, Marcel bought me a tracksuit. Uh, and I mean, nobody had tracksuits in those days. If you had anything, it was a bathing suit and no top, and just, you just ran. But it was a top and a bottom of a red color. Marcel was working for an athletic store, and he managed to get it from the owner for next to nothing because they hadn't been able to sell it. And I was the best dressed track person in Laredo there for a while, as far as having a tracksuit. I think that pretty much I've been busy and didn't get really prepared for this one, but don't know how far we've been or how long we've been. But if that's good, or we can talk a little more if you want, Beej.
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll stop the recording.